Welcome. Today we have Justin with us. Justin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, I reached out to you to bring you on my podcast because I've been following you for a little bit. And for any of my listeners who listened to episode, I'm going to say 12 with Chris Crutchfield, I
Oh
recently
yeah.
watched the live with you and Chris, and I think Joe and Alec. I'm getting
Yep, it was
everybody
Alec.
right. You guys
Yep.
had a very riveting conversation. And a lot of my listeners have reached out to me saying that they love the episode with Chris. And it made me want to reach out to you because the things that you have to say, especially on Instagram, uh, I someone's got to say it, right? And you actually, did you start an organization called We Are Change?
No, I didn't start it, but I picked up the Orlando chapter
Nice.
about 9 to 10 years ago and just kind of took that over when with someone who was not really doing it anymore. But I was really inspired by that organization, but I didn't found it or anything like that.
Well, tell us about it.
So it's really, We Are Change is one of the groups that I latched onto when I first woke up and fell into the rabbit hole. I was obviously upset about all of the things that we were taught incorrectly. So I wanted to get out and educate people. We Are Change is a nonpartisan, decentralized, independent media and journalist organization. So it's basically activists and journalists running around exposing the corruption in government, confronting politicians. As many people, if you're familiar with Luke Rudowski of We Are Change, that's what he's, got kind of popular for and got their name on the map. It was originally birthed out of like the 9/11 Truth movement, but it's expanded into just a media organization that covers any corruption, encourages people to be the change they wish to see. If we're basically trying to protect our rights, protect our environment, protect our health, anything of that nature. And I saw the need for real media and journalists asking real questions because, as we all know, that doesn't really exist anymore. So it inspired me to see him sticking the microphone into Henry Kissinger or John Kerry or Hillary Clinton's face. And that's what really inspired me to do what I've been doing. And if you look at the We Are Change Orlando YouTube page, you'll see the host of topics that the organization covers.
Yeah. So do you listen to the High Wire or watch the High
Oh
Wire?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. I
Yeah, who
talk about the
doesn't?
High Wire a lot on my show. Thankfully, somebody maybe 3 years ago now sent it to me.
Hmm.
Someone I went to high school with too, in a very liberal city in upstate New York. And he was like, "Hey, let me know what you think of this." And I've watched every episode ever since. My husband watches it every week now. So like, it's
I
like, did
almost
you
wore
watch
my
it
high
this week?
wire shirt for the interview. I did,
Did
but I
you?
was like, I may wear it this weekend for an event because the Children's Health Defense Bus is coming to town. And I
I
was like,
saw
you know
you
what? That's a good
posted
time
that.
to wear my high wire shirt. So I may do that. But yeah, it's a great show. That's the real, again, that's the definition of being your own media and
Hmm.
getting the word out there. I mean, how crucial was Dell during COVID, especially for people just figuring these things out? I mean, that was like one of the only real sources you could go to for information about COVID and the vaccine, that was kind of
Yes.
popular and had a good voice and a good, production behind it. Everything else was just kind of splintered off and you'd be lucky to find it.
I think that if that person from my high school hadn't sent that to me and I
Hmm.
started listening, I mean, I could have been one of those people lining up to get the shot, like, oh my God, I
Yeah,
don't want to kill my mom.
right,
Sometimes I do, but you know what? Not that way.
right,
But
figuratively.
you got little kids. Like you said, you have a 4-year-old. My son's
Hmm.
5, and I have a 1-year-old. So it's like, yeah, you get these fear mongering things around you and you just want to do what's right. So
Right.
yeah, the High Wire and Del Bigtree and Jeffrey Jackson and Aaron
Yep.
Siri all had a huge role to play in my waking up. In addition to Chris Crutchfield that you interviewed with, because I was asking him a lot of questions in the beginning and he just thankfully responded to me. I mean, I'm sure he gets lots of questions, but he did, write back to me or record stuff back to me. And one of the things I remember him saying was, because I said, listen, I was a complete liberal. And
Hmm.
then I went over to the Trump train and it was like, oh my God, I'm losing all these friends because I'm now like, yeah, make America great again.
Right.
And then talking to Chris, he was like, no, Trump had a role and he played it very well. And there was a post that you had, maybe yesterday I saw it, and I was like, oh, that line that Chris said to me, Trump had a role and he played it very well, like totally played
Yeah.
into this post that you had because I didn't quite see it at the time. And then maybe when the vaccines rolled out, I was like, well, maybe this was the role. And then now,
Hmm.
as we have the whole Israel and Palestine conflict, I'm like, yeah, no, there was a much broader thing going on.
Right.
And it's we're kind of ignorant to think that it's just, oh, this happened to happen here, this happened to happen here. Like, no, there was a laid out plan. I'm starting to see more and more.
Yeah, and Chris is a great person for that. Talk about someone who will take you all the way down the rabbit hole, and really, he does a good job of explaining it too.
Hmm.
Um, it's just really important, I think, to go back and peel back those other layers, because then you kind of understand how long this has been going on, how
Hmm.
many different institutions of society it kind of stretches into, and I think you get over that initial, oh, well, this can't be because, it'd be too big of a conspiracy. There'd be too many people in on it. But when you really break it down, it's not super complicated. You've just got a lot of people, take one industry, the medical industry, repeating what they were told. Wear the mask, do this, stay safe. And you've got a lot of well-meaning people doing the wrong thing. And then you go to uncover like the genetically modified food science or the science behind the vaccines or the science behind this, and you find this pattern. And like Dell says, when we talk about fluoride, GMOs, vaccines, it's really the same formula. You've got smart people, well-meaning people that have been put into like a system that they kind of just have to toe the line. And if they don't,
Hmm.
they lose their job, they lose their funding. It's really unfortunate. So I guess that's what we're all here to do, just kind of flip those things back over and turn those
And that
stones
makes a
over.
lot of sense. So for myself, I've been a government employee for 16 years now.
Hmm.
And part of this whole waking up, I blame Chris as part of it, but is like, wow, I have wasted 16 years in a cubicle, not doing anything creative, just come here, sit here when I see things that are wrong with, the operations that are going on and say something, they're kind of like, oh, hush, child. Okay, we'll
Right,
just set
right.
up a monthly meeting about that. We're going to set up a work group, right? And then nothing ever gets done. And I literally, for the last, like, well, before I went out on maternity leave that I've never stopped maternitying from, I was like, no, here's how we can fix this problem. I can fix it in a day. And they're like,
Right.
no, we don't
Yeah.
want to fix the problem. And so, and you're right with the funding, everything is funding. And here we worked
Mhm.
for Cuomo, and I saw firsthand deals that got done because they were Cuomo's buddies. They had
Yep.
no experience. We had to step in and so that was more money on the taxpayers, just more money, more money, more money, more money. And now you're not only paying a contractor that has no experience, but now you're paying overtime for state workers. And it's like, if this
Hmm.
is just this agency, and I've worked for 4 different agencies, and it happened in all of them,
Yeah, that's just like one example.
extrapolate that with all the state government offices and then all the
Right.
federal offices and the county and all that. And then, yes, like you said, the medical field, which
Yeah.
it's just crazy. So the reason I brought you on today is like the information that we're given in school and then in the media, right? So that we
Hmm.
got like kind of two platforms that we get our information from, growing up in school and then in the media. How do we, as homeschooling parents, or even not homeschooling parents, but most of the people listening to this are thinking about homeschooling or homeschooling currently, say, like, this is the information I'm going to give my kid, or decipher this is truth, this is not, or things like, I don't want to go into something that's happening today because it's too like raw, but something like
Right.
the JFK assassination, or like a great video that you have talking to the mayor and commissioners about NASA and what they're doing
Hmm.
with the funding for the ISS program.
Right.
Um, things like that, like landing on the moon. how do we, or 9/11, how do we present this information to our children when we know that there are things that are not being correctly told to us, but then you also don't want your kid to be like, like like Encino Man, walking out when they're 18 into real life, like not understanding what other people are talking about. Where do we
Right.
toe this line?
I think it's a great question, and it's so ironic that you said JFK because it brings me to a JFK quote. In one of his most famous speeches, he says, I have the full confidence in the American people, basically to make the right decisions whenever they are fully informed. And he's
Hmm.
talking about the press and getting the right information to people. And I have that always stuck with me because I've learned that, like, when you arm people with knowledge about their medicine, the medical products they're putting in their body, their foods, they go to the store, now they're reading the labels and they're better equipped and they make the right decisions. They don't support that big company that was, poisoning the water or enslaving people, or sending their money off to another foreign country. They don't support that politician anymore. So it's like that translates to the kids as if we put all the information out on the table, I'm confident that when they're fully informed on like all sides, that they'll choose the right thing.
Hmm.
Take the vaccine thing for example. If you showed them, okay, here's the slogan, safe and effective, saved millions of lives, one of the best medical advancements of society. And then you're like, now let's see where the evidence is to support that claim. That's a really good line I like to use too is,
Yeah.
okay, here's the claim. Where's the evidence to support it? And then you go start looking. And then you find out that Del Bigtree and Bobby Kennedy have sued the CDC and HHS, and they haven't done any studies in 30 years. And they haven't tested them together. And they only test them for 2 to 5 days. So there is no science, really, when you break that all down. Okay, so now that safe and effective thing is just a slogan. And I'm confident that the kids, when they see that, they will go, that's BS. And this
Hmm.
makes sense. Because
Hmm.
when you're given it all, I think we can use logic and understand the propaganda, the BS from what's real. But the problem is we're fed one narrative and
Hmm.
everything else is said to be, those are crazy people, those are conspiracy theorists, that stuff's censored. It's very hard to find that information online. So I think we just got to lay all the cards out on the table for them, is basically the answer. And then
And
let them decide and talk through it, I guess.
I agree with you. How do we as parents find all the cards? Like
That's the hard part.
the Tuttle Twins had a really good ad for their history books, and Connor Boyack, who's been on the show before, he talked about in the ad, in textbooks in school, they talk about slavery. They only point out that America had slaves. They don't
Right.
talk at all about all the slavery going on in all of the world.
No.
So they make you feel like America's terrible, but they don't put it in context of this was a societal norm. Yes, it's bad, but it was a societal norm. I mean, that would be like someone in 100 years coming to us saying, you owned dogs. You had a dog just sitting in your house all day. You put it
Right.
in a crate ever, or you ate cows. Like it's a societal norm today. Is it right? Is it wrong? We don't know, but it's a societal norm. So, how do we find all the cards to lay out to our kids to be like, this is all the stuff about slavery? Like,
I think that's the hardest piece of it right there. And it's become
yeah.
harder because I will say 10 years ago when I fell into this rabbit hole, you could go on YouTube and you could go on Google and you could type in what you were looking for and it would come up. It wouldn't give you the WHO or the vaccine.gov and just fill you with propaganda for 8 pages. So I think what people have to do is you've almost got to become detectives again. You've got to learn the alternative search engines, whether it be
Mm,
DuckDuckGo or Yandex or these other websites. um, some of those are even becoming compromised. Heck,
yeah.
I'm even telling people at this point to go to TikTok. Isn't that crazy that you
I
can go
was
to
banned,
TikTok,
Justin. I've been banned. I'm very bitter. My audience
keep
knows.
keep creating more accounts. They can't
They
stop you.
will not let me. Do you have a
Really?
workaround? Like,
There
no
should be
matter
a
where
workaround.
I sign in from, it is like, we know it's
Oh my
you.
gosh,
You
that's
have
good.
been banned.
That's That's really good on them. So they're very strict, but there's still so much truth on there. I literally tell people you can go to the TikTok search bar and type in something and literally get more accurate results on a topic than Google. So
I
it's
believe it.
almost become an avenue to get, because there's so much information over there. There's a lot of garbage, but you can actually
Yeah.
find information on there. So I would literally tell people to look on alternative search engines on TikTok. Reach out to people like me and you, people who are collecting this information. I've got resources that saved for years now that you would never find Googling. Like I've got a vaccine
Yeah.
guide PDF that I'd be happy to send people. It
Awesome.
literally lays out all the frequently asked questions. NVIC, the National Vaccine Information Center.org. That's a great website. Learntherisk.org. So I mean, it's very kind of scattered, and there's not like a very well packaged answer for that. But you really just
Yeah.
have to become a detective. Make friends with people who have the resources. Start finding out how to get them, and it will lead you to more.
Yeah.
The Tuttle Twins. That's a great one.
Oh, good. All right, good. I'm an affiliate for them, so I'm
Yeah.
glad that you like them. I've
Yeah, they
enjoyed the
talk
books.
about the
Like,
money system. I mean, they go into
yeah.
like real history and what the Federal Reserve is really about. I mean, that's good stuff. I haven't read all their stuff. I can't like say 100% that they're the best thing, ever, but I've seen some great clips from them.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I
it's
I
encouraging.
I haven't gotten their history books because my son's only 5, so I figure that's
Hmm.
going to be later on down the line. But just the books for the age 5 to 11, we can read the book. He likes the illustrations. He likes, their quotes back and forth to each other, their dialogues. So, then we'll have a conversation about, well, why do you think capitalism is good? Like, let's talk about ice
Right.
cream shops. Why would you go to this ice cream shop versus that ice
You
cream
know,
shop? And
and that's a really good point you just like made me think of, is asking questions. I think that's because I've always learned that's one of the best things with trying to get people to listen to some of these topics that are a little resistant. It's best to just ask questions. And I think that's best with kids too, because then you can just say, hey, what do you think about this? And then what do you think about this? Their raw mind is now going to ponder both topics like objectively without a bias. And again, I have confidence that you've looked down some of these rabbit holes. When you look up the official story of the government sometimes, whether it's some of these attacks or some of this science, you're like, this is actually like embarrassing that we believed in. It's a little laughable. So it's very simple when you lay the cards out.
yeah.
So that's what makes me feel good about people figuring out. I'm seeing kids these days even going on TikTok and sharing stuff, and they're getting a compact, for what used to be a 4-hour documentary on YouTube. They've taken the best clips, added some visuals and some little things to it, and now it's this little compact 2-minute video, and it's being shared. And it's the history of the Federal Reserve or what have you. And I'm like, wow, this is really evolving fast, and information is cleaner and more packaged and just going and going. I think that's why they want to ban that platform, like deep
Yeah.
down.
I'm very jealous. I wish I were. Not that I
I don't
want to
spend
give
that much
like,
time over there, but when I peek
yeah,
in,
I
I
don't want to
see
give
how much.
China all my information, but I figure they've got everything they want anyways. So
Yep,
whatever they can't get from TikTok, they can get it from Instagrams or Facebook. So, um,
yep.
yeah, I am jealous, man. I keep trying. If anybody knows how to get back, it literally says every
That's
time I try to
crazy. You'll
from a
have to
different.
maybe try signing up. Try signing up with a new name, new email address from someone else's computer.
I tried from my son's iPad. That's how
Wow.
desperate I got, and it was like, no, we know it's you. I don't know
Oh, wow.
how.
Yeah, yeah. I may
I don't
be
know
able to
how.
find something for you. I'll
Yeah,
ask
it's
around.
bizarre. Um, so okay, so getting into things like, I mean, there are things that you wouldn't even know were a conspiracy, right? Like some people that are just were part of the herd. Although I feel like the homeschooling community, you're homeschooling because of some distrust with the government. Like, so I feel safe enough to talk about politics on my show, because I feel like whether it's the vaccine issue, I'm in New York, so it's like you
Hmm.
can't send your kid to school unless you want everything, are okay with everything on the CDC
Right.
schedule. Um, then there's, the total like gender ideology and that sort of thing going
Hmm.
on in the schools. And then we have for everything else from, I mean, I've even thought of like shelter in place drills, right? Like, what is
Yep.
that? Okay, it's sad that we're sending our kid to a place that a shooting has happened and could potentially happen again. But that's like
Right.
one avenue of it. The next avenue is what are you doing to them psychologically when you're
Bingo.
doing shelter in place drills every year or twice a year?
And I'm sure you've seen the memes, like there's so much to that. You can keep going. Your list is just the beginning. I mean, you could
Yeah.
say making them stand in those single file lines and the way that how rigorous the schedule is. Think about the comparisons to prison, telling you when you can eat, telling you when you can stand up and use the bathroom, busing you in on those same exact buses that they take people to prison on. It's really kind of strange. And then
Well,
now they've become even more like
prison
prisons because of the shootings.
and government work.
Yes. So that it's like, Rockefeller said it. They wanted obedient workers, not critical thinkers. So when you go to school and it's obey, 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 don't question authority, fall in line. Heck, that was enough for me to say, I don't know if I want this for my son. And now you throw in the masks, the vaccines, the gender stuff. It's like this is a really, really toxic, environment that seems to be teaching like everything upside down, and
Yes.
I'm not as worried about shootings because of the government's involvement in fudging some of those themselves, but it still worries me because they do allow them to happen, and they really do happen sometimes, and it's like you just can't trust it because it's whether it's terrorists or the government, it still could potentially happen.
Right. And even just the drills themselves. What are you telling
Hmm.
your kid every time that they have a shelter in place drill? Yeah, maybe the little ones don't know why they're having it. So it's not doing a lot to them then. But as they get older, middle
Right.
school and high school knows why we're having a shelter in place drill. And it's to tell you guns are scary. Your neighbor can turn against you. So you better trust authorities. We're here to protect you. And it's
Do you
just
remember
a
the one?
very
Do
go
you
ahead.
remember the one our parents had? They had the nuclear hide under your desk because there's gonna be a nuclear blast. For one,
Because
hiding under
that'll
your
work.
desk is what's that's gonna do, right? And second, that was a very Cold War psychological. The Russians could get us, we could at any time we could be at war, and it's like now our kids have what you just described, but it's the same exact thing. It's like trauma-based mind control, fear. It's not a good thing. There's just another reason we can add to that long list of maybe find yourself a little charter private thing or do a homeschool, find something unique,
Yeah, and I think
you know.
homeschooling has become so huge. I just read an article last week that was saying how it like tripled in the last couple of years. In fact, I keep meaning to
I
make some
bet.
sort of Instagram reel about this because it was talking about how they have people like John Oliver and all the mainstream liberals, news
Hmm.
sources talk about how only stupid people homeschool and you're just making your kid racist and yada yada. You're not equipping them for the real world
Racist? How can they become racist like
because
that?
when
Like
you
that
have them
seems
in your home, they're not being exposed to different cultures, different races. They're not being taught the like social emotional learning thing of like
do they
learn
think they don't
other
go outside?
yeah, learn other people. Well, I think they're thinking of like little podunk towns that don't, only see tumbleweeds. But it's like, okay, well, where those kids go to school, what different cultures are they seeing anyway? So,
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't sound like that's based in reality because, for instance, like my son's not in school yet and he sees people from all walks of life, whether it's at theme parks, grocery stores, parks, playgrounds, you know what I mean? Like that's just and it's just that goes back to those old like myths, oh, homeschool, your kid's going to be weird or,
yeah,
the Amish are strange. Well, now I
yeah.
think the Amish and the people who that homeschool are the people who figured it out and everybody else is weird. So like it's just
When you
funny how
look
that
at,
works.
yes, when you look at the amount of kids that are so confused about life, and I was just listening to, I don't know if you've ever heard of Andy Frisella. He,
I'd heard
he's
that name before.
he's
Yeah.
got a podcast and he just basically screams at things, but he's very, hardcore, and he has a line of nutritional products, and he's succeeded in business ownership and entrepreneurship. But so he has this podcast. He just talks about like how I don't need this money. I just think you people are ruining the world, so I have to tell you all about it. But anyway, the episode he had on recently was that a college kid was on a football team and didn't show up to practices for weeks, and then
Hmm.
had a meeting with a coach that he failed to go to. So he goes into the assistant coach, maybe it was, and records them. And the assistant coach is screaming at him the whole time, which is how sports were when I think I'm a little bit older than you going by the numbers on your email, but that's how sports were back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. You don't show up, you're cut, you get screamed at, like you have
Yeah.
repercussions. And this kid is expecting to just walk in, videotape the coach yelling at him, and then wanting to share it around social media so that he can sue the guy and make a buck
Oh
off of that.
gosh.
And it's just like shows the mentality of the kids that are in school today. Like I can take the
Hmm.
easy way out. I can not show up to practice and then give a gotcha to
Yeah.
anyone that tries to tell me that I'm wrong for just not showing up because of mental health issues or whatnot. Not to diminish the mental health part, but like, even if you have a mental health issue, you can call your coach and say, this is what's going on in my life. You don't just not show up, and I
Right.
think that's where the issue with the kids are today. So to say that homeschoolers are weird, I mean, it's like, what is coming out of the schools today?
Yeah, and I mean, we all went to, I don't know if you went to public school, but I did, and
Yeah.
there was plenty of different kids and weirdness and flavors coming out of public school. It wasn't like public school just made everyone into this. It's strange because we do talk about how they make us into like kind of the same
Cookie
thinking and the
cutter.
same sort of drones, but at the same time, everybody's completely different and has a
Mhm.
different environment and different friend group and neighborhood and parents. So it's like, yeah, they're kind of just silly arguments. I think it's they want us in the system as much as possible. Have you ever heard the theory that so Aaron Russo was a filmmaker. He made the movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd.
Okay.
He also made a movie called Freedom to Fascism about the money system in our world, the Federal Reserve Bank and all this.
Okay.
He knew Nick Rockefeller, one of the Rockefeller family members, and he told them at one point, not only about 9/11 and what really happened, but he also told him one day, because he befriended them over the years, and he said, what do you think women's liberation was about? And he was like, what do you mean? He was like, it was when women got the right to vote. He was like, no, it's not, you idiot. He goes, we funded that. He goes, we funded that because we knew that if we could get the other half of the country, all the women in the workforce, we could tax them. And number
Mm-hmm.
two, we could get the child into the government schools sooner and begin indoctrinating them and taking them away from the family, splitting up the family system, taxing both parents, all part of this new world order that they want to put us in. And it's just really interesting when you think about that stuff because sure, women did get rights and there were very genuinely passionate people out there fighting for the right thing. But then money comes in and funds it for a totally ulterior motive. It's just crazy to think about, and why and how early they want us in our kids in these systems.
And you can say the same thing about, I've talked about that very thing on my podcast before.
Hmm.
And you can say the same thing about even like the LGBTQ community, right? Like you wanted the right to marry. Okay. Well, so
Right.
you fought for that, you protested for that. Well, let's think about even marriage. A long time ago, marriage, there was no place for the state or government in a marriage. You
I'm
didn't.
fighting for the right to get the government's permission to tell me to do something.
Right. You married with a Bible. It was part of a relationship with God and the
Hmm.
Bible and your spouse. And you just wrote it in a Bible. There was no
Right.
$100,000 wedding and getting the state's permission to do it just so you can get maybe a tax break. I didn't
I
I didn't
know.
see a tax break after I got married. We were taxed up the butt. So, and then or maybe you got some health insurance, but so what? So they could like pump more things into your arm and give you cancer. So like
Right.
when you think of this, like, we're fighting for the right to marry, like, what are you fighting for? You're literally
I
fighting for the
know.
government to be a part of your life, that you have to ask them permission to go home to that person every night. I mean, that's
I know. You could even make this argument. The some of the vaccine people will make this argument, and it's a valid argument because what are we fighting for sometimes? Exemptions. Exemptions from what? Being exempt
mm,
from them taking away my medical autonomy. I shouldn't have to fight to ask for an exemption. We should just not do it, you know?
right.
But unfortunately, that's the system we're in, and we have to, if we don't get the exemptions, people will be forced. So they've almost forced us to pick the question option instead of just the no option.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just sometimes it's just part of it. You have to kind of play the game and pick and choose your battles with that.
Man, that is there's so much, and you're right. Like you said earlier, when you look at it, you see how ridiculous the thing even is. Something like, I was reading in the comments of one of your posts earlier, someone had written about 9/11 and the planes, a plane actually hitting a building, and they were like, have you ever looked at a YouTube video of a plane hitting a flock of birds and the damage that does to the nose of a
Oh
plane?
yeah,
So when you think of what would happen, I mean, just simple
right.
things like that, or like building 7 is even easier. Like, how did that just
Very.
controlled demolition collapse before the newscaster, like, the newscaster said building 7 collapsed while it's still in the background,
For
and then it
25
collapses.
minutes. Yeah.
I mean, there's so much, and I mean, I get it though, if you don't have the time to look, and I think that's part of the government's plan too, is to make us so busy that we don't have time to not only research, but even think about the surface
Yes.
of it. Like, of course, America was the only one to have slaves because we don't have time to consider any other option.
I had
Yeah.
a friend, a coworker, who's not with us anymore, actually, rest in peace to him. But I
Oh,
remember
I'm
telling him
sorry.
one time, I said, don't you, have you ever looked into XYZ, or did you ever look at that documentary I sent you? And I remember he looked at me, it was kind of like a busy day. He was kind of flustered. And he was like, man, I don't have time for that shit. He was like, I got to take the kids to practice. I got this, I got that. And I was just like, man, that was a real answer. And you're right. Like, I get it. People are stuck in the rat race. We've got debt and kids practice and all these things going on that you don't have time to go research everything you should have been taught correctly in this 12 years of indoctrination. I'm sorry, I mean schooling. So it's like, what do you really expect? So I'm like, I'm very grateful for when I figured it out because I was had a pretty cush job. I was in college. I had a lot of free time. I was just with my roommate hanging out. The internet was really starting to take off, and there was the YouTube suggested videos after my uncle sent me stuff, and I was able and had the time to digest and kind of learn all those things. And that's unfortunately what like everybody's gonna have to do.
So is that your wake up, your uncle sending you the stuff? Because right now I'm the
Yeah.
crazy aunt that sends things to my nephew.
Yeah, well, you never know what you're gonna who you're gonna spark because he sent this to me and I bet he had no idea that my entire life would change and I would take on a whole new passion and direction. The way that I met my partner was because of activism, so like I could even tell him like the reason I have my son is because of you. Like you kind of
Oh,
like changed the whole direction of my life and obviously for the better. I joke with people. I say if becoming a conspiracy theorist was so bad, all I did was stop watching mainstream media, stop thinking so negatively, eating poorly, cleaning up your mind and your gut and trying to make the world a better place. I mean, if that's a dangerous conspiracy theorist, then I'm guilty as charged.
yeah. So what documentary did he send you? Or what did he send you to
It was
initially
actually
spark your
about
interest?
aliens.
Yeah.
It was Dr. Stephen Greer. It was called What's Really Going On, Part 1 through 4. And it was about aliens, but it was also about how they were potentially hiding free energy technology so they can like levitate crafts, how they built the pyramids, a whole host of things that they could do. And they're hiding all of that from us because they can sell us oil and tell us it's going to run out, and they can use scarcity and control our resources and charge us money. When in reality, we could levitate our craft over to the next town. We could not have power bills and water bills, but they keep all these things on us so that we're tied down and too busy to figure out our true potential, our true history. And I think when I was like, they're hiding this secret technology, and then the families that were doing it were also controlling our money and planning the wars. It was just this cascade of events, and I found out that these people really were like, the world is a stage, like a lot of people say. We don't go to war why they tell us, and um, our money is devalued by like 99% since the inception of that bank. It's just a really crazy story, the true story. And it's also more fascinating. I've told people 100 times that this is way more interesting. And history and science class was kind of boring to me. I wasn't that interested.
Hmm.
But now the universe and our money and our history is more fascinating than ever. I'm just now learning about Tartaria, and I'm about to read this new book called The One World Tartarians by James W. Lee. And this is about an entire civilization that they've erased from history. And we believe that they may have had the hidden knowledge to build these structures and these cities and these, magnificent buildings that they claim they built with a horse and buggy, but we can't even replicate today with technology and modern machinery. Um, it's really fascinating. And just to encourage everyone to look more into that, my friend's got a movie coming out called Old World Order by Hibbler Productions. If you look up Hibbler Productions on YouTube, he's got a host of films he's made, but this one's going to be really good, and I think it's going to crack open our true history, and it'll be a good one.
Yeah, I just heard him on Sam Tripoli's Tinfoil Hat, actually.
Oh, great.
And I think I actually purchased one of his previous documentaries. Um, because Hibbler sounded really
That's-
familiar, but I listened to
yeah,
him and the stuff he was saying made so much sense. How would they have gotten a horse and buggy? Think just about the amount of water the horse would
mm,
have needed to
I
go from
know.
this distance, this location to that location, that entire distance. Where would the water have come from to
Right.
make sure the horse could sustain that? And I'm like,
Have you ever visited any of these pyramids or anything in Mexico or
no,
in any other country? I've
no.
seen one, and when you see one and you see the precision and the size, you know right away that they didn't pulley this up with slaves and donkeys. Like, you just know. And the doors and
Wow.
the steps are the size of, for like, someone that was like 10 or 20 feet tall. It's just really crazy stuff. So I mean, definitely we're lied to about something there, and I'm curious to see some more when that film comes out.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense because I've talked a lot, like my main go-to on how boring school was when I talk on the podcast is, oh, I know they talked about the Incas and Mayans, but I don't know what they
Right.
really said, the Aztecs, Incans, and Mayans, but that probably was the coolest stuff, and they're just not telling us the reality of it.
The full truth. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
I
think
never made
the
that connection.
pyramids were like I think the pyramids were like energy harnessing devices. They may have been put here by whoever put us here. I don't know, but uh, there there's just so much more to it. The underground
Yeah.
cities, potentially hidden continents. I mean, there's just so much out there.
And so that
It's so
sounded
much more
crazy
interesting.
to me too. Like when it first started coming out that like there are tunnels and children are, basically trafficked through these tunnels. I'm like, no, nobody would do it because I wouldn't do it and nobody I know would do it. But then you have to
Right.
kind of get to this point where you're like, well, how do I treat cattle or chickens? Like my chickens stopped laying eggs for me. So I'm ready to unleash them into the woods because like chicken feed is expensive. So why would I feed these chickens that don't produce any eggs for me? So I'm ready to send them off into the woods and have them be coyote food. So like when
Right.
you think in terms of like the elite, think of us in that
Hmm.
manner. Like you're not producing anything for me. Why are you like I don't want you releasing carbon dioxide into the world that's going to destroy the world for us and our children and grandchildren. And when you get to that point you're like, "Oh, all right, I might understand a little bit better." And then we were watching a show probably on Netflix about like modern or no, something about tunnels, Marvel tunnel marvels or something like that. And
Hmm.
it just goes into all the tunnels in all the different countries and how elaborate these tunnels are. Like they are cities under the world. And so I'm like, I thought this was a conspiracy theory, and they've got a whole Netflix show about it. Sorry, I was sick last
I
week. I have
will.
laryngitis. But I'm like,
Oh, it's okay.
they're putting this on Netflix.
I know. It's
Of
really
course
crazy
they're
how much they do.
trafficking children through these.
Oh, who knows what else? It's really crazy how much they have put out on in the public's eye now. They kind of, and a lot of people believe, and I think this may be true, that they do kind of tell us things first. They
Yeah.
like have this revelation of the method kind of code of ethics. I don't know how they could have ethics, but they have a code. They kind of have to tell us things. That's why the 9/11 was put in movies before it happened. But um, oh, I lost my train of thought. I was going to say something else
The
about that.
tunnels.
Oh, good. Thank you. So the other really interesting thing about the tunnels, have you ever heard of Phil Schneider?
No.
So look him up. He was like a geologist that allegedly worked for the government, and he was hired to help basically dig out the underground tunnels. And they built underground military bases. And they would call him and say, "Hey, you're the expert. You're like the smartest guy. You know how to what rocks to blow up, what way. So you're going to tell us how, deep to dig it and what to use to blow it up." So he would go in, and he has a story that he claims that in New Mexico or somewhere they went down, and when they were digging these massive holes, they would drill down first. This like black soot came up, and they went down there and they claimed that aliens were legit down there, and that a firefight ensued with Green Berets and these alien beings, and he was shot and he survived. He used to tour the country and talk about these underground bases that he helped the government kind of set up. And he says that they're interconnected and they're all over the US. There's hundreds of them, and they connect on these like really fast trains that levitate above the track, and they could go from LA to DC. He had 9, I think, attempts on his life. And
I
they
was gonna
got
say,
him on the
how did they
10th or
not kill him?
11th. They finally got him. I think he actually had someone, he killed one of them that was trying to kill him. His like security did. But they eventually got him. His wife and kids had like a website in his name for years after. But this guy was going around in the late 90s talking about these underground bases and tunnels under the Denver airport, out in New Mexico, across all states. And I remember it just being so fascinating. Like, wow, they could really have an entire underground world down there, and we just don't even know it.
I tell you, if you watch this show on Netflix, I mean, it's amazing. And this was stuff back in like World War II. They were going down there, and prior to that.
Yeah.
So if they had the technology to build all this stuff, I mean, yes, a lot of it was prior to World War II because they were talking about ancient civilizations being down there. But like, of course, we would have it now. I mean,
Yeah.
like you said before, some of the stuff, it's like, well, you just gotta think about it and be
Like, why
exposed to a
wouldn't they?
couple of
Like
things.
you said, if they had it in the old days, it's like, why wouldn't they? Like, typically the
Right.
crazy and weird things that they've done, they don't usually go away. They just go in the dark, behind the curtain, underground. Whether it be Bohemian Grove or these disgusting things that these Pizzagate people do, it's like that stuff unfortunately never stopped. It's just hidden.
Yeah, poor Alex. But with his
Who's
Bohemian
that?
Grove, poor Alex Jones
Oh, I
going
know.
into
Gosh.
Bohemian Grove. They got him later.
He probably wishes he never went in there.
I know. So now you have a 4-year-old. Like, how do you parent knowing like this is how our world? What are your goals in teaching him throughout the years? And like, what do you want him to know by 18 or whatever the, year is that they're supposed to flee from our care?
Right. Well, that's an interesting one because I've got friends who tell me that, because for one, I just want kids to be kids for the most part. Like, I had a life of bliss and not knowing about any of this stuff up until 25. And I'm really grateful for that because I kind of got to live without just being a kid and not worrying about it. I got to see both sides of the fence. I know what it's like to be asleep, and believe in the lies. So I'm very grateful for all of that. But I'm obviously not just, you don't want them to be totally ignorant because then they're going to grow up when they get to be 18. They're going to be fighting with you just like the average person because their indoctrination is complete.
Mhm.
So I think it's just, I'm going to work on finding a balance between letting them be kids and not knowing, some things, but also, preparing them for what the world is really like. Letting them decide what the truth is, letting them filter out the stuff, showing them how to research, showing them how the lie or the deceptions can be out there. Um, you know, hey, like give an example. You show them, here's what they said happened on 9/11. Maybe they learn about it and you go, okay, well, you show them a video and the building collapses and it shows the firefighters going, there was these explosions coming out and it was going boom, 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 boom. And then you ask them, hey, does that match up with what they said? And you're like, no, those guys made it sound like there were explosives in the building and they were there. That's eyewitness testimony. So it's like, I'm probably going to, you want to introduce those things, I think at the right time. But, so yeah, I think that's a long-winded answer, but balance with being a kid and being prepared to understand what the world really is.
And what do you think the world might be like when your son is 18?
No idea. Because things are happening so fast now, and the whole technocracy merging with machines and the smart cities is a little terrifying. Um, I don't know. I'm really hoping it's not a world where the majority of people think life is so miserable that they're just putting on VR goggles and going into the metaverse all day.
Did you ever watch the movie
That's what I'm
Wall-E?
getting. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hoping that we can prevent. I mean, some of it's inevitable,
Hmm.
but I really hope that we don't, plug in like in the movies and stuff.
Yeah. And oh, I was going to ask you from what you mentioned earlier, have you seen all of the Cars movies?
Yes,
Okay. On the
I
level of
have.
like what they're actually telling. I mean, all of the Disney sort of movies tell like
No, no,
have
wait, enlighten me. No, tell me.
okay, you're gonna have to watch it again going through like I went through it like a normal person just watching the Cars movies. My husband has a very like analytical mind. He does commercial HVAC, so he's doing like engineering type works every day and he's like,
Okay.
"Do you know what this movie's about?" I said, "No, what?" Like, they're racing cars. He's like, they stole all the oil, put it onto an island, made everybody buy a different kind. And then at the end, when that kind didn't work, sold them the oil that they held captive on the island at higher prices. And it was when you were talking about them having other energy and stuff, it made me think of that.
Oh my gosh, you're right. I'm not good with doing that with movies because I will like check out and
Hmm.
watch the movie. Like you said,
Enjoy
to me it was a
life?
kids
What?
movie. To me, right. To me it was a kids movie about cars. So
Yeah.
like a lot of times I won't. Like I've seen movies like for The Shining, for instance. I would never pick up on those clues. But you go back and you watch the moon landing clues in The Shining and you're like, "Oh my gosh, he was legit telling us that the
Oh,
moon
I didn't
landing was
know
faked."
that. I would be
Oh, you
too
haven't
afraid to
seen
watch
that?
The
Oh yeah.
Shining anyway. No. I live in the
Well,
country. Mm-mm.
you don't have to watch the whole movie, but watch like the clues in it and they'll just point out the things that are placed in and you're like, "Oh wow, none of that's not a coincidence." Like things are named Apollo and like the number is the exact moon landing things and it shows that like he's telling you it was faked.
Wow.
I don't necessarily I'm pretty sure that Kubrick's daughter has admitted that she's like very, very sure that he didn't direct the moon landing. So I don't know if he actually did, but the movie still may be telling you that it was faked by them.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's
Interesting.
an interesting one.
Which, oh, I have to bring up, I meant to bring it up when you were talking about your t-shirt for the high wire. I wore my t-shirt
Yeah,
today. Be the role model your government fears. That's my
nice. I like
podcast's
it.
t-shirt. So
That's
for
awesome.
anybody listening that wants that t-shirt, go onto my website.
That's
Um,
awesome.
because yeah, we basically, if
Good
you're
message.
homeschooling, you've got to be the role model that the government fears, Like they don't want
Right.
self-sustainable people. I think for myself, I want my kid to have a fun childhood, which is, why he's not stuck in a classroom for 6 to 8 hours a day right now, but also to know real work. He knows that he's got to go take care of the chickens and whatnot. And, do things. But even I want for him when he is 18 to be able to like maybe know a lot about building a house or how electricity
Mm,
works or things like, that are real world stuff. Everybody goes to
yep,
college for business or liberal arts. And it's like, where does that get you? That's what I did. And what does that get you? 16 years sitting in a
right.
cubicle in government work, not doing anything,
Yep,
pushing papers, and then now it's pushing emails. And it's like
I
such a
know.
waste. And I even just I so I've been out on leave for 15 months now. I've started the podcast. I just wrote a children's book that's getting edited right now, and I'm looking for
Awesome.
illustrators. And yeah, I'm like what to do in emergencies, cuz like when we were kids, I mean, we had a dial-up phone in our house. That's how you knew to call. Kids don't have that anymore. Like a lot of houses
Right.
don't have that, and your phone locks. So it's like, what does a kid do if there is an emergency? And
Well, that's a
but
really
anyway,
good point.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't realize it till I was homeschooling that I'm like, all this curriculum is just about how to read. But like, what do you
Yep.
do if I pass out? Like, where do you,
I
what,
know. It's like all those it's like that long list of things you could say about, "Oh, how come we're not taught how to balance a checkbook, how to do our
Yeah.
taxes, how to avoid this and that." Like just so many different nuanced things with real life that they don't like survival skills or, like you said, different trade skills. I mean, I don't think they have shop class anymore. I feel like my one of my grades were one of the last people to have it. Heck, they're not even driving real cars in driver's ed. In some schools, it's
Yeah.
just virtual. So it's like they're taking away like the real life aspect of so much, and then you're gonna have people that like all they know how to do is like you said, go in a cubicle. I'm even guilty of some of that stuff. I wasn't shown a whole lot of like gardening and
Right.
there's random foods that you could have showed me in my 20s and I'm like I don't even know what that is. I'm
I'm
sure
like
you
that
have you ever
now.
seen that video of the kids in I think it's in New York, but someone comes in and brings in different fruits and vegetables and they're like, "Do you all know what these are?" And the kids didn't even know. And I was like, wow, and that's exactly why I have a garden because I'm trying to show I want my son not to be ignorant of what a date is when he's 24 like I was.
No, and my
Yeah.
mother was part of that. She was born in 47. She grew up in the 60s and was part of that women's movement that like, yes, we go to work. You're going to be bottle fed and go to daycare. And
Right.
so that's what I knew. So we grew up on takeout food,
Yep.
she'd never learned to cook from her mother, but also she didn't have time to cook. So I didn't learn any of that.
Right.
My father's mother did all that stuff. She was from Poland, but she died when I was 8. So I don't know any of that stuff. And I'm trying to learn it now because
Right.
his sister, she lives in Wisconsin. She'll come visit me. She'll send me cookbooks and she'll be like, here, this is, you need a pie dish. Let's buy you a pie dish. I'm like, really? So it's been like a total learning thing for me. But we have a garden, and
Yeah.
the only thing that sucks is like you only get one chance a year to like perfect this garden, and like what you mess up on, you have to remember next year not to do that.
Right. I know. It's a total learning curve. I mean, I used to joke about how, man, look at all the money I have to spend and time I have to devote just to relearn things, just to not poison myself. Got to buy water filtration systems and organic food and, spend a little bit more money to eat at this restaurant because it doesn't have a bunch of processed crap. And you're making all these decisions, you're buying organic diapers or whatever you're doing, and there's just so much going on that they really do have you do have a lot of work to do to stay like healthy and informed and like to have your kids on the right path. But again, the advice too I want to give people from saying all this is like don't beat yourself up. Like
Yeah.
there are times when you're going to have a piece of candy. There are times when you're going to have french fries. Like there are times when you're going to watch a movie that's mindless. Enjoy that moment because as long as you're not doing it all the time and it's, there's balance and moderation, like enjoy that one piece of cake for the occasion. Because I've had a good friend give a speech one time, and someone with a very bad mindset eating something like that is you're just making it worse. You might as
Mm.
well be vibrating as high as possible as you eat that toxic food to help balance that out.
Oh,
The
interesting.
upset person, the very very angry person. eating the organic salad may be having a more unhealthy experience than the person who's just elated with joy eating a Big Mac.
There you go. Oh, I
So it's
love
just like
that.
something to keep in perspective. Like I used to always hold that with me and think, you know what? I'm not gonna beat myself up if I have, the pizza or whatever. It's just like, just savor it, enjoy it, and then make the decisions each day that you feel best are for you and the healthiest.
Yeah, and because it can get so overwhelming, what I've kind of thought about too is,
Yeah,
all right, let's dial it into, okay, what can I control that we are getting injected with? And then what can I
right,
control that we're ingesting? And then what can I control that we
right,
are inhaling? And then what can I control that we're just like maybe seeping like lotions, deodorant, lotion,
right.
sunscreen. Okay, well then what can I control that we are maybe washing off like a soap, like people worry so much.
I was a bit of a victim to that too, of like really stressing out in the beginning because I was hosting the March Against Monsanto. So it was like no GMO foods. And I was like, well, I'm the guy who's hosting it. I can't ever eat like not organic food, you know? It's like, so it was really stressful in the beginning because I was way too crazy about it. And now it's like you're gonna have some every now and then, you know?
Yeah,
It's not you're not gonna be perfect, but like I said, it's just minimizing your exposure to the toxins is the key, you know? It's not a lethal dose. You know, one glass of water is not gonna kill you with the fluoride. But if you are down in it for 20, 30, 40 years, that's when you may see the issue. So that's why we have to just like do our best each day.
absolutely. Well, Justin, I've had you for almost an hour. Can you tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, We Are Change Orlando on Facebook, YouTube, and you can find me on Instagram and Twitter, Justin_We Are Change.
Awesome.
Oh, and if
And
anyone wants to move to Florida, feel free to reach out to me. I'm a realtor for by day, so I help people buy and
yeah.
sell homes here, and that directly helps me, get into other shenanigans like confronting our mayor and speaking out more.
Well, I'm in New York and a lot of New Yorkers are moving to Florida.
Oh, I know. We
I
know.
can't I can't convince my husband because since he does commercial HVAC, he works on a lot of roofs and he was like, "I am not
Okay.
working on a Florida roof." So it's
Why?
gonna have to
Because of
be
the
like
heat?
Tennessee for us. Yeah.
It's because of the heat?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. You get used to it. You do.
I'll tell him that.
And I know
Yeah,
a
I
great
mean,
roofing company as well.
it's like 10 below here for 6 months out of the year. So I don't know what he's complaining about. But
Yeah.
thank you so much. I would love sometime to do like a live with you and Chris. It would be so fun. Um,
Yeah, anytime.
I'll be in touch. I know he's busy having all the babies. So thank
Yeah.
you so
But awesome.
much.
Yeah,
This was
I'll be
so
happy to do it
informative.
anytime you want to.
I'm sure we have provoked lots of thoughts in people, and hopefully they'll be able to sleep tonight. No,
I hope so
I think you
too.
had great advice. Thank you so much, Justin. Have a great night.
Thank you. I appreciate it.